All right, folks, we're getting back together today to talk about the other half of linear perspective. We've already, in our previous video, talked about 1-point perspective, which was always a face view if we're looking at our object. It could be above, below, off to the sides of our vision, but it was always a face view with 1-point perspective. So today we're going to learn about 2-point perspective. And as the name suggests, we're going to have 2 points instead of 1, and that point no longer is our center of vision. But this horizon line is still our eye level. We're going to go ahead and label this, and we're going to call it eye level, just so that we remember what it represents. Now, as the name suggests with 2-point perspective, instead of having, like we did on this first one, where we had 1 dot, and we started with our face of our objects here and here. 2-point perspective is always going to be a corner. We're going to have a corner view now instead of a face. So the first thing we have to do is we have to establish our vanishing points. We're going to call this vanishing point number 1, and this is vanishing point number 2. Now, in the first one, we would always start with our front face or our back face on our object. So what we're going to do with 2-point perspective exterior. So we're looking at the outside of that object, is we're going to start with a front corner. So instead of drawing a rectangular object or a square, we're going to start with a line that represents our front corner. Now, this line is what decides which vanishing point gets used for our exterior 2-point perspective. If it's on this side of the line, it goes to vanishing point 1. If it's on this side of that front corner line, it goes to vanishing point 2. So once again, let's try to keep these convergent lines, because there's only 2 types of lines in this drawing. It's either convergent or it's vertical. We're going to run our convergent lines back to vanishing point number 1 and vanishing point number 2. So as we look at this, we now have the front corner of our object. We have the top and bottom of the object as it goes back into space. So our next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put in these 2 corners in the back. So if we line up to where we're parallel to the front corner and pull it back, there's one side and here's the other. So this is what our cube or rectangular prism is going to look like at eye level. So let's go ahead, and now we're going to go up here a little bit further. Let's stay towards the center of the paper, because you end up with distortion that you don't get in 1-point perspective when you're using 2-point perspective. The closer you get to the line or the points, the more severe your vanishing point convergence will get. So if we're towards the middle here, we won't have to worry about that as much. So I'm going to go from the top and bottom of my corner, because it doesn't matter where it's at on the paper. It can be way over to one side, it can be in the middle, but this line right here decides which side we go to. So I'm going to go from the top and bottom of my front corner, and we're just going to draw right through that first object, because I'm not too worried about overlapping here. So now we've got our front corner, we've got our convergent lines showing how the sides go. So our next step that we did down here was we came back, we put in our verticals to show the back 2 corners. Now the last step to get this bottom plane, because it's up above our eye level, is going to be to line up to the opposite line, the back corner, the opposite back corner, and draw this across over to here. And then I'm going to line up to this corner and draw it back to this vanishing point. So now I have our front face number 1, front face number 2, and then we have the bottom here. So let's go and do one more, and let's do it way down here. Now, when we get into actually talking about how to make a drawing with this, I'm going to talk to you guys about how we can avoid getting that distortion we get when we get close to the vanishing points. But for now, what we're going to do is we're just going to stay more towards the center of the paper. I'm going to go ahead and put my vertical line in to represent my front corner. I'm bringing my convergence back to either side, and I know which one they go to, which vanishing point they go to, based off of which side of the front corner we're on. Our next step, drop in our vertical lines that show the back corners of this object. And then we're going to cross it over. And the reason we're crossing over and breaking our own rule here is we're creating an inside corner instead of an out one. So we have to reverse the formula. So this is what our object would look like. Here's front face number 1, here's 2, and this is the top. Okay? All right, so the other half of this is we have to talk about how to create an interior space. We're going to start with our same horizon line, and we're only going to create one here, just like we did on the first one, because we don't want to have to start adding other issues into here. Now, instead of drawing the front corner, we're now concerned with this back corner because we're inside of this space looking across. So the line that I'm going to create is going to be the back corner. I'm going to put my vanishing point number 1 and vanishing point number 2, and this is going to be the exact opposite formula of what we just did on the other side. If it's on the right side of this interior corner that's the furthest away from it, it's going to vanishing point number 1. So anything over here is on vanishing point number 1. Anything on this side goes to vanishing point number 2. So if I line up that back corner in the dot and I travel out like this from the top and bottom of that back corner, and then I'm going to come from vanishing point number 2 and do the same thing. We've even eliminated the horizontal lines in this drawing. With 2-point perspective, it's always going to be convergent to one point or another, or it's going to be vertical. So on this wall right here, if I want to put something on this wall surface, I'm going to use vanishing point number 2, or I'm going to use vertical lines. Keeping in mind this is eye level, I'm going to draw a door in here. I want to make sure the door goes plenty high so that we're not knocking our head on it when we walk through. And then I'm going to use vanishing point number 2 to get the top of the door. And then I'm going to put in my parallel. Now I can even do something neat here. If I want this to be an open doorway, I can line up to this corner here like this and draw it back. And I can line up to this corner here and draw it back. And what that does is gives us a ceiling, wall, and a floor that travels back out of this rectangular prism or cube. All right, so moving on, if we go over here to the other side and want to put a window in, I'm once again going to keep in mind that eye level is where we want to look out the window. I'm going to get the top and bottom of this object from vanishing point number 1 because it's on this side of the line and we had to reverse what we were doing on the other side. And then I'm going to put in my parallel line to show that opening. All right, so if we go to start combining these two, the best advice I can give you is to figure out where your front corner will be before you start to draw your object. And the way that I do that is let's say I want to set a little table by the door over here. I'm going to come from vanishing point number 1 to decide how wide I want that table to be. And I'm going to come from vanishing point number 2 to figure out how far I want that to come away from the wall. So this right here is the physical floor space that object's going to take up. And it also shows me where my closest corner is. So if we go back to this here again and look at it, the closest corner is what we need here. So we're going to start with a vertical line. And since we're doing exterior, it's going to go to the same side. If it's on this side of the line, it goes to vanishing point 1 with this one and this one. We're going to go to vanishing point 2 on this side here and down here. I'm going to bring that out just a little bit further. It might block our door a little bit, but that's all right. We're going to put our vertical lines in to show the back corners. And then we're going to cross over to get the top of my object. So for this, we're going to talk more about how to get things into this space, but for what I want right now, you're going to turn into me 2-point perspective exterior with one at, above, and below eye level with the labels vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2, horizon line, and eye level. Put your label up here at the top, 2-point perspective exterior. And then on interior here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to label it to 2-point perspective interior. So now between the two of these, we've learned how to draw a corner and a face view. Between the two, we should be able to, no matter what position we're in, be able to draw these objects using 1 or 2-point perspective.